the Lions, remember, we've talked a lot about their 3-year rebuild, and they spent their time in the trenches and then worked their way out a little bit more to the perimeter, hit on so many draft picks over the last couple of years. Amon-Ra St. Brown in the 4th round, like, he accelerated their receiver rebuild because they had nobody, right? Remember, they were just signing DJ Chark for 1-year deals, and like that's how they were doing it. Now this Detroit roster in a much better spot, man. And a lot of what they're anticipating is like, hey, when and how much are we going to pay Penei Sewell, and make sure we've got enough money for Aiden Hutchinson in a couple of years, right? Those are the types of decisions they're making right now in Detroit. I do think when we look at team needs, they need a starting guard. Jonah Jackson hits free agency at left guard. And then the secondary, where last year a lot of their moves, this was their last piece that they got to, I think, in the Lions rebuild, was the secondary. And last year was a combination of, a 1-year flyer on Emmanuel Mosley, a trade for the one last year of C.J. Gardner-Johnson. There's more work to do in the secondary.
Yeah, and that roster is in very good shape right now, in large part because of the draft that they had last year that was so maligned. But the other thing that's enabled them to have a really good roster and have a lot of cap space and be in such a good situation is they've had that Jared Goff contract, which the majority of the money was already picked up by the time they got hold of him. The longer that deal went, the cheaper it looks in comparison to every other high-priced quarterback contract. But now it's reaching the point where you're going to have to re-up him again, right? Presuming that that's what you're going to do, which I think it is, given how he's performed within that offense. So if you're going to give Jared Goff a new contract, number one, what does it look like? And number two, if that's going to be bumping him back to something approaching top of the market money, that changes the dynamic. Now you're going to now the fact that you have a lot of cap space, most of that is going on that deal, and you're going to need these young guys, earning not a lot of money to offset some of that.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. I thought they solved the middle class QB puzzle for a little while, and now they'll have to.
But in a non-repeatable way.
Right. It only works for a couple of years.
Right.
And they got a lot out of it, man.
Yeah.
They almost got a Super Bowl appearance out of it. They got continued improvement, not only from Goff, but from the rest of the roster, right? I mean, when they first traded for him, it was almost like, you go be a facilitator for these young players that we're going to bring in, who are eventually going to be the core of the Lions, and you're not going to be a part of it, right? I mean, they may not have thought about that, but I think a lot of people around the league saw that. Goff was a throw-in.
Yeah.
So they got a ton out of him already. So now, where do the Lions go from a team-building standpoint? I do think just every single week when we talked about the Lions, we said, okay, pass rusher opposite Aiden Hutchinson, in part because there were injuries and, James Houston was hurt all season, and he'll be back. But I do think defensive line can definitely use some depth or an impact player at edge, and I think the secondary needs to be addressed.
I think people are rewriting history a little bit when it comes to that Jared Goff trade/contract. Like Brad Holmes being on the other side of the deal and having been part of sort of acquiring Goff in the first place, it was absolutely part of the equation. And if Brad Holmes had been like, this guy stinks, I hate him, it's probably not happening that way, right? But
nobody believed Brad Holmes when he said we believe in Jared Goff, he's our guy. Nobody actually believed him.
But also, I don't know that he believed that when he said it out loud, right? I don't think that was necessarily a reflection of his honest opinion, because if it was, the deal would not have looked the way it looked, right? That trade happened. The trade is the value that it was because Goff was seen as a drag, not like a boost. They weren't like, hey, we're getting a quarterback in exchange for this guy and all this other stuff. Like, Goff was seen as a negative on that side of the trade overall in the structure of the deal. Now, a negative that had a chance to turn out well for them in that, hey, what if he does bounce back a little bit and we can go with him as a starting quarterback for a couple of years, and then the deal, as it has transpired, doesn't look that bad, and we're not, and absolutely, like a deal with upside. But it was a negative. Like, they weren't looking at this going, we are stealing Jared Goff from them as part of this deal to get rid of Matthew Stafford and get, let's not, just because he said out loud, I love Jared Goff, I have total faith in him, does not mean that they believe from the very outset that they were like robbing the Rams blind in this trade. It's just worked out really well for them.
All that said, defensive side of the ball here for Detroit?
Yeah, I mean, was it last year or the year before where we kind of looked at this group and you started reading off the list of like really young, talented pass rushers, and it's like they've got both Aquaras, Josh Pascal, Levi Onwuzurike, like all these guys they brought in. Almost none of them have panned out. Like Aiden Hutchinson was obviously the one really big hit. Alim McNeil has been good as well, and then they got the sort of bonus, the added impact of the situational rusher who was injured all last year.
James Houston.
Yes, James Houston.
Mentioned earlier.
So those kind of three guys have formed something of a core, but all of the other guys that we listed out have basically done nothing, and they need to be replaced, or at least, change for other guys that could come in and make an impact.
Are they in the market for your 3-down Jonathan Grenard, Danielle Hunter? There were rumors about, Lions fans were asking, will Kwesi and the Vikings trade Hunter in the middle of the season to their division rival because they've made trades before? Is Danielle Hunter a really good fit here to pair with Aiden Hutchinson?
And they're in this fascinating world now where, NFC Championship game, had it won before letting it slip away. Like, how do they treat that? One of the biggest off-season dynamics facing every NFL team is how did they view themselves right now based off the most recent evidence, which is how the last season just went. The Giants last year were a great example of a team getting that wrong badly, right? They just completely misevaluated where they were as a franchise, and I think that led them to do some mistakes, to do some bad things last season when it came to these types of decisions. So you're the Lions. You were pretty good a year ago. You were expected to be very good this year. You got to the NFC Championship game. You almost knocked off the 49ers, who for a big period of the season were the best team in the NFL. What do you think of yourself as a team now? Do you think that you are like the classic one player away? We are one big move away from winning a Super Bowl in 2025. Do you go hard and go for something like a Danielle Hunter or, a big splash move like that? Or do you have a little more self-control and go, look, last season was great, and Dan Campbell has at least suggested right after the fact that this might be the case. We might never get back there again. Like, we can't go crazy. We need to do this the right way, and let's be, self-restrained, and let's be careful.
It's a great point, Sam. I would say I think they're smart enough to know, keep your foot on the gas. Keep doing what we've been doing. They hit on 4 of those top 50 or whatever draft picks. I think Jack Campbell is going to be a hit at the end of the day, but the other 3 for sure. They hit on those draft picks. They're not living in this world with the extra draft capital anymore. So I think they have to continue to hit on their picks because they'll have fewer picks. But then same thing, if you're really looking 2 and 3 years down the road here, you keep hitting on draft picks, just like the Saints had that 2017 draft class where they all came due, and Ryan Ramczyk and Kamara and Trey Hendrickson. You have to anticipate being able to pay all those guys in a few years. And as I mentioned, Hutchinson and Sewell, the Lions now have this world where they've drafted so well, 3 and 4 years from now, those dudes have to get paid. So you have to continue. You can't be just throwing money around like crazy. A Danielle Hunter move, though, I don't think is one of those, right? I think that's a move. When you say this team thinks that they're one player away, my mind goes to that, I mentioned this 2008 Jaguars team that traded from like 25 to 8 to go get Derek Harvey because they thought they were one pass rusher away, right? The Lions aren't going to do that. They're sitting there at 29. They're not going to trade into the top 10, I don't think, to say we're going to, they did a couple years ago to go get Jameson Williams, so who knows? I don't think the Lions are going to say we're one player away. We're going to trade all of our draft capital to do that. I think they're smarter than that, to just kind of stay the course and add that depth. But I don't think a power play for a defensive lineman like Danielle Hunter is the wrong move. I think that is a good move. But I think the one position that they need to attack with draft capital and in free agency is cornerback.
We've seen a few teams now have individual drafts that have been so good that they've completely changed like the entire trajectory of a franchise. I don't know that we've ever seen one do it again, like the next year. I mean, the Lions, all the conversation about the Lions draft last year was simply about value and, position, the allocation of resources.
It's more so when you got the guys, not who you got.
Not who they got, which I think was almost universally praised as getting good players, regardless of where you got them. But the point being, if the strike rate from their rookie season continues forward, that is the type of draft that changes the entire outlook of a franchise going forward. What if they did it again? I mean, they have 4 picks in the top 100 again. If they did that twice, like, okay, we go in and we nail 3 or 4 of the first 4 picks we have in this year's draft. I mean, that, like, everything changes. The Lions now become like the team in the NFC for the next few years.
They have a chance to become a powerhouse. And the other part of it is they can't say we're one player away because, I mean, the Packers could be better than them next year. The way the Packers were trending and the way Jordan Love started playing and all the youth that Green Bay has, you can't look around that division and say we're the top dogs by far. Mm-hmm. Green Bay's on their heels. Minnesota's still going to be a good, solid team, assuming that they have a starting quarterback. And Chicago's about to get Caleb Williams into the building with another top 10 pick with him. I mean, it's going to be pretty heated in the NFC North, I think, in the coming years.
Yeah.
From a cornerback situation, the free agent list, there's some older players like Stephon Gilmore on there. There's guys like Adoree Jackson, who I'm always a big fan of Adoree Jackson if you get him at the right price. But he's coming off a poor year, but he's had a good career previously. Brad's projected contract in Adoree is 1 year, $7 million. That's what the Lions did last year, right? We throw the $6 million at Emmanuel Mosley. We take chances on Cameron Sutton, who struggled last year and didn't play up to what he had done previously. But I wonder if Adoree Jackson is like that James Bradbury-ish reclamation project that you bring in if you can get him at the right price. I think that could be a good move for Detroit. And again, I think in the draft, I mean, I wouldn't hate if they doubled up at corner with 2 out of those top 100 picks.
But one of the areas, given the cap space and the money and the position that they are, like, they could be a team to go not one player away, but if we're going to make one big investment, what about a guy like L'Jarius Sneed? You know, make him a number 1 big or top end of the corner market deal. Like, make him a number 1 superstar corner for this team, a guy that can play inside or outside, gives us the flexibility to do whatever we want on defense, you know, is in his prime. Like,
I would love it.
That's the kind of move where it would be a big splash play for a team that's already good, but it wouldn't be crazy. Like, it wouldn't be flittering resources away. It would be putting it in the right place.
I'm good with one big splash move at corner, like a Sneed, or at edge, like a Danielle Hunter. I'm good with one of those on that side of the ball for Detroit. And then trust your process otherwise. Again, receivers always an interesting one. You know, they got a lot out of Josh Reynolds last year. They traded for Donovan Peoples-Jones. They have the great Khalif Raymond. They have Jamison Williams, who's shown flashes of being as good as Khalif Raymond at points in his career. How do they attack that position? Amon-Ra St. Brown's about to get paid as well. I should have mentioned him on this list of, you know, ready to make a ton of money.
I mean, he's going to get paid. Penei Sewell's going to get paid. Like, they have a lot of big contracts coming up. So even though they have, and the Jared Goff thing we talked about, right? So they have $50 million in cap space. I mean, a lot of that is sort of already earmarked for players that are on the roster right now earning far less than they should be.
All right, did we fix the Lions?
Yeah, we didn't do much to them, right?
Well, I mean, again, a lot of what they're doing is keeping guys in-house. I think we gave them a power move, either at corner or at edge. Mm-hmm. You know, they're going to grab one of those guys. And then I do want to see what they do at receiver. I want to see more. If you're going to maximize Jared Goff, I think you just continue to keep those playmakers there. Give Ben Johnson what's needed. Were you trying to give them Derrick Henry at some point this offseason? They still have David Montgomery, and obviously they have Jahmyr Gibbs. But were you talking Derrick Henry to the Lions?
I don't think so.
Or was that a fan asking me if they should go get Derrick Henry?
It doesn't sound like something I would do, but
no, I don't think so either. I don't think they should do it. I don't think they should. But I'd like to see another receiver in the mix here. But they've built depth. Remember last year they had like 6 linebackers competing. I mean, really, legitimately, like 4 linebackers competing for 2 spots. I think they need that type of competition at corner this offseason between draft capital and free agency. So that's my suggestion.
Nice.